Hi, StephBot. Just watched your video on stateless dictatorships and thought I should reply. You set up three, I believe it is, potential ways a government might develop in a stateless, not just any stateless society, but in anarcho-capitalist free market society without a state. I have some major objections to these, and my fundamental objection is that you seem to create straw man arguments that aren't very realistic. They certainly, and then you do at the end mention a rather plausible objection, and yet you just completely discount it. So hopefully in this video I could develop some of those thoughts. Part of the problem I have, it didn't seem in your video at least that you made the distinction between a state and the government, and something I've done in other videos, because there is a difference. A good example would be Salvador Allende. In 1970 he won the democratic election in Chile, and for 3 years he was in control of the government, but he was never able to get control of the state. And by the state, I'll use Max Weber, the German sociologist's definition. The irreducible trait of a state is its legitimate use of force and violence. It has a monopoly on the legitimate force of force and violence. It's the difference between, a city council and the police force. They're overlapping. Certainly, they're. We kind of. I guess the problem is we seem to think of them as one thing. In world politics, of a leader gaining power of the government and never really gaining power of the state. And the state's primary function, it has two basic purposes. The primary function is social and class control, to protect the haves from the have-nots, to maintain security of those who accumulate wealth from the labor of others, to protect wealth from the poverty that wealth creates, and to make sure that there is no reversal from the continual upward redistribution of wealth. And it's safeguard from reform, from revolution, all these different things. And it's at the end of your video, you did mention a possible DRO scenario where the DROs collude together, and you just dismiss. But in it, you seem to dismiss much of history, because what we see in history, and the ultimate problem with your stateless society is it would be a society in which the capitalist property relations would still be sanctioned, I guess. You would still have a factory owner rather than the workers of that factory collectively owning the factory. You still would have employers and employees. You would still have a class system, and I doubt you disagree with that. But if you have that class system, according to all the theorists, that is why a state develops. John Locke, in his second treatise on civil government, the grand and chief end of men uniting into commonwealths and putting themselves under government is the preservation of their property. Adam Smith, in 1776, the necessity of civil government grows with the acquisition of valuable property. Till there be property, there can be no government, the very end of which is to secure wealth and defend the rich from the poor. James Madison, at our Constitutional Convention, made it quite clear when he told the other delegates, the primary purpose of this government is to protect the minority of the opulent from the majority. So as long as you have those property relations in your society, whether it's stateless, whether it's in a state, The state is going to develop because that ruling class, the people who own and control the wealth and the resources in that society, are going to form combinations. Go back to our favorite guy, Adam Smith, from The Wealth of Nations. We rarely hear it has been said of the combinations of masters. Combinations, unions, masters, capitalists, though frequently of those of workmen. But whoever imagines upon this account that masters rarely combine is as ignorant of the world as of the subject. Masters are always and everywhere in a sort of tacit but constant and uniform combination, not to raise the wages of labor above their actual rate. Here, of course, he's talking about, labor, or, the industrialists making sure that wages aren't raised. But that's not the only reason they form combinations. They form combinations to protect their class privilege. They form combinations to exert control, to form cartels and monopolies. And the state serves a function. You made a mistake. One erroneous thing you said was, this idea that it would develop out of a want to maximize profits. That's not why a state develops. James Madison at the Constitutional Convention would say we're developing this government in order to maximize our wealth. It was to protect their wealth. That's why a state develops. Numerous examples can be given. We could look at Cuba. Trade sanctions. Crazy in a capitalist system, right? But it's not crazy. In order to protect the global capitalist system, sometimes certain countries need to be shut out of that system because they offer an alternative example of another way to organize a society. We saw this in Vietnam, the Soviet Union, Nicaragua, Chile. All the countries we've invaded or attacked had some kind of social, progressive, socialist, Marxist, programs. That's why we toppled Mossadegh in Iran when he nationalized the oil, the Sandinistas, Muammar Gaddafi and his Colonel's Rebellion, on and on down the line. Like in Cuba, we didn't mind, Batista. In Nicaragua, we didn't mind Somoza. We don't mind brutal dictators. What we do mind are, any kind of leader or progressive movement that moves towards a more egalitarian society. And so no single capitalist is going to decide, well, I'm going to show Cuba and not sell them my products. Well, of course, what would happen? Another capitalist would move in and would sell them the products. So the state serves a function that no individual capitalist could perform. You get into costs and stuff. A guy steals $40 from a liquor store, and we incarcerate him for 5 years at $20,000 a year to incarcerate the guy. As a society, we spend $100,000 plus on this guy who stole $40, right? And, a million examples like this. Why? It seems crazy from a capitalist point of view. But as a society, you make an example, you spend the resources to make an example of that individual to protect the property of others. That's why these things are done. It's not always a purely profit-driven motive. We didn't invade Grenada for the nutmeg, as Ronald Reagan so eloquently pointed out. And we didn't invade Vietnam for their rubber and raw materials. These things, there's a class system that needs to be protected. And what your examples don't take into account is that the ruling elite do combine, and they have to, in order to protect their property. That's why states develop. Thank you.